MarkRogersTV on the selection of the 13-member committee, which will be selecting the 4 college football playoff teams beginning in 2014. Let's start with the chair, Jeff Long, athletics director at the University of Arkansas. Let's run down the 4 athletic directors currently. You've got Barry Alvarez at Wisconsin, Tom Osborne at Nebraska, Oliver Luck at West Virginia, and Pat Haden at USC. You've got Archie Manning, of course, a legendary quarterback at Ole Miss. You also have Mike Gould, who's a 3-star general. He was both a player and an assistant coach at the Air Force Academy. Tyrone Willingham, who's been a coach at 3 big-time programs at Stanford, Notre Dame, and Washington. You also have Steve Weberg, 30-year veteran sports writer at USA Today, mostly covering college football. Mike Tranghese, who founded the Big East. He's also one of the creators of the BCS, and before that, the Bowl Alliance, for you college football historians, and for those of you who have been around about 20 years, just prior to the BCS, the Bowl Alliance, Mike Tranghese was instrumental in the creation of those 2 endeavors. Dan Radakovich, the Clemson athletics director. You've got Tom Jernstedt, who was a former quarterback at the University of Oregon, among other things. Then we also have Condoleeza Rice, professor, provost at Stanford, and also Secretary of State and National Security Advisor. Okay, that's the 13 right there. Let's run down a few categories here. So we've got 4 current athletic directors. We also have 10 former players. We're a little bit heavy on the quarterback side, which would make sense. They're the high-profile players. They're usually in a leadership role, and that leads on into life. But possibly could have considered some players with different backgrounds besides quarterbacking. You've got Pat Haden and Oliver Luck and Archie Manning and Ty Willingham to a certain extent, and also Tom Jernstedt was a quarterback at Oregon. I think it's very important, and certainly this was a priority to represent all the major conferences. It is interesting that out of the athletics directors that there are 4 current athletics directors and 2 come from the Big Ten, and Tom Osborne and Barry Alvarez, both still at their current universities. That's basically my thought at this point. Until there's a boneheaded decision made, I think it's a pretty well-balanced decision here in this selection. You've got mostly people with football backgrounds. Of course, the one exception, the one controversial exception is Condoleeza Rice. But we're not talking about a 2 or 3 member panel. I would have issue with her being selected to a 2, a 3, a 4, or 5 member panel. We have a wealth of football experience here, a wealth of experience dealing with big-time college athletics and college football. You bring in Condoleeza Rice, she brings a different perspective among 13 people involved in this process. I would like to hear from you because I have no gripes with this. I'm always going to have a gripe with the selection process of selecting teams to play in a playoff. It doesn't happen in any other sport except for college basketball, where you're basically selecting the bottom tier teams. Most of the top teams in the country make it automatically into the NCAA tournament, and the real controversy comes in selecting the bottom 4 or 5 teams, which really don't have a shot at winning the national championship. These people are entrusted with selecting the 4 teams that will make the college football playoff. Go through each season. Start with 2012 and try to select the 4 teams that should make the college football playoff. I'm telling you, it's impossible. It's impossible because teams don't play each other. Teams don't even play teams that play each other. It's an impossible process. They will be scrutinized and criticized. But as long as they have a good thought process in place and it makes some sense, I'm going to hold back from my criticism to a certain extent, even though I hate the selection process. I only believe that this is one step better than the current system of selecting 2 teams to play in the national championship game. Now you're selecting 4 teams. It's not a true playoff. A playoff is an objective system, a black and white objective system like the NFL, Major League Baseball, the NBA, the NHL, where the wins and losses determine who makes the playoffs. There are tiebreakers in place to determine when teams have the same record who should go in. Check out my previous posts in how I would set up a 16-team playoff. It would not involve a selection committee first and foremost. It would select the teams that won conference championships. And if you have an issue with the Mid-American Conference or the Sun Belt being represented for the national championship, then you don't allow those teams to play football bowl division type talent and type tier level competition. You make them break off and play their own conferences, their own schedule, their own divisions. You force these teams to play one another, and you either allow everyone to be equally represented and to equally have a shot to play in a national playoff, or you separate. Okay, again, I don't have any great opinions right now. This is simply the selection. I think they're a bit heavy on quarterbacks in terms of playing experience, but other than that, I'm good with the selection process in selecting the committee. It's very football driven. And again, Condoleeza Rice could certainly bring a different perspective, and she's only one of 13. No issues with that. Now, I would like to hear from you. You can spark the conversation and certainly probably spark some opinion in me. Would love to hear from you now on the selection committee to determine the college football playoff starting in 2014, right here on Mark Rogers TV.